Hello, and welcome to another episode of Conversations for Research Rockstars. I'm your host, Catherine Korostoff. Qualitative research professionals often create top-line reports as a key deliverable. Sometimes the top line is the only deliverable, but in other cases, it is a preliminary one, which is then later followed by a more thorough, full report. Unfortunately, the term top line is often misused, but as a research rockstar, we want you to know the correct use. And in this Conversations episode, I'll also be sharing some guidance as to how you can create a top line with confidence. This conversation is an excerpt from the Research Rockstar eLearning course on writing qualitative research reports, available at training.researchrockstar.com. The word top line gets misused a lot. You'll hear some people talk about top lines, and then they give you a 30-page document that's called top line. Well, I don't care if you put the word top line on it. If it's a 30-page document, it's not a top line. Top lines are intended to be very concise. They're intended to be a concise way of delivering the most important findings from your research. And the idea is that they're also produced pretty quickly. So for example, if you've just done 30 IDIs, the idea is, oh, we can get a top line on the results, say 3 to 4 business days later, right? So it's typically, a word processing kind of thing. It's typically very short form, and it is typically meant to be written in a very quick manner, often within 2 days of the research data collection being completed. Sometimes that is a preliminary deliverable. So I might be saying, okay, we're going to do the 30 IDIs. That's going to take a lot of time to go through and really go through that data and summarize it and write a full report. But I know my client or stakeholder is really under pressure. So I'm going to write a preliminary deliverable in the form of a top line, and then I might deliver the full report later. However, in some cases, that is your deliverable. Now, typically, if a top line report is a deliverable, it's usually in cases where the research objective was extremely precise and there's not a lot of nuance to it. It's like, oh, we just did a project to see which of these 5 potential TV commercials resonated the most with our target population. Well, that's pretty cut and dry. You're going to walk away from that research being able to say, well, these 3 bombed. These 2 had merit. Maybe we don't have an absolute winner based on qualitative research, but we know that these 2 definitely performed better than the others. That doesn't take a lot of time to figure out, right? You're going to have those results pretty quickly. If it's something that's more about discovering attitudes and behaviors and exploring values and aspirations, that you're going to have to go through the data to get. You can't do that in 2 days. So if it's a very, very succinct objective, then you may very well be able to have a top line be your final deliverable. You know what the results are, deliver them. Don't make it more complicated than it needs to be, but depending on the objective, right? So in this case, I've got a common scenario where researcher Ricky has completed 6 focus groups in 3 cities and writes a 3-page top line. Then 2 weeks later, Ricky is going to deliver a 25-page full report based on the more thorough analysis, including verbatim quotes, maybe taking selected video clips to make a video montage, etc. With top-line reports, they are typically very objective, again, because they are meant to be written quickly. So in a top-line report, we typically do break the rule about that we see in larger reports, where we typically avoid organizing the results by question. Sometimes in a top-line report, we actually do that because, again, we're doing it quickly. The bullets are just summarizing the results. In top lines, it's typically very light use and sometimes no use of verbatim quotes, because verbatim quotes take a while to find, select, identify, etc. The length of a top line is typically 2 to 5 pages. Again, if somebody gives you a 30-page document and puts top line at the top, they might be calling it a top line, but that's not what a top line is meant to be. The style is very factual, again, because it was written quickly. You typically don't have a lot of time to talk about recurring themes and trends in the data. It tends to be very factual. Most of our IDI respondents reported blah, 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 or very few of our mobile ethnography participants liked blah, blah, blah. So it's typically that kind of very factual summary type of information, again, because you didn't have time to do more. Less common, but you sometimes see these useful components in top lines, is sometimes you'll see a top line report that has tallies on select items. So let's say in our example of environmentally friendly ice cream packaging that we were doing, let's imagine we did online focus groups now for that particular project. And in the online focus groups, which were webcam online focus groups, we had people raise their hands when we asked a question about how many about recycling. Raise your hand if you have to sort your recycling as opposed to have single stream recycling, and people raise their hand. You might just do a tally on that. So you might have tallies on select items, and you might also have statements about observer consensus. This was actually something that I picked up from another researcher many years ago, and turns out to be really effective. Readers really love this when they see in a top line report that the people who are observing those focus groups shared a common takeaway. So let's say we're doing these online focus groups and we had observers, right? So the observers are observing online, they're observing the groups. Well, whenever we do qualitative research, after each research event or after every 2 or 3 events, we do a debrief. It's a really important part of our process, absolutely a best practice. And so we'll debrief with the observers. So the moderator, the observers, the project managers will debrief and say, hey, what did we hear? What did we see? How did this address our objectives? Did we learn anything that we need to know before we do our next group or our next IDIs? If in that debrief, everybody had a very strong consensus about something, it's great content to share. Hey, all of our observers noted that during the IDIs, that every time we talked about this particular type of recyclable material, that people were especially excited. People really like the idea of bioplastics. Awesome. Then that is telling the reader, this was a part of the results that got excitement, right? So that's interesting to them. And I've actually found that when I can put that into a report when it's true, and I've got consensus from the observers, adding that as little bits of analysis in the report or to support my analysis can be extremely helpful. You've reached the end of another episode of Conversations for Research Rockstars video podcast. Visit us at researchrockstar.com for articles and for our free market research glossary. Please give us a like and subscribe so that more future Research Rockstars will find these episodes. Thanks.